Mm. So we're just going to begin with a little sitting practice. Um, there are so many meditations. I just encourage you to use one or pick one that you feel is right for you in this moment. Uh, and that's a skill in itself, isn't it? Just tuning in and going, what do I need? You know, so we'll do that, and we'll have some time, probably about, I don't know, 7 or 10 minutes of sitting, and then we'll dive into some practice. I mean, transmission, sorry. Same thing. Cool. Ding. Mm. In many ways, the first 7 gestures are a complete path. And someone could practice them, and it's like there's all these teachings there. It's sort of all the Hinayana and Mahayana teachings are contained. The first gesture is the Sat Dharma, the truth of Dharma, the truth of existence. The second gesture is about the 4 reminders and impermanence, the teachings of impermanence from the Buddha. The third gesture is about the 3 jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, or the idea of taking refuge in our potential, the practices, and our community, which is by being in touch with ourselves fully. The fourth gesture is about the loving kindness and self-love and the necessity of that to traverse the path. And the fifth gesture is about the practices of bodhicitta, awakening the heart. The sixth gesture teaches the emptiness teachings. And the seventh gesture teaches the entering into compassionate action, the paramitas and the conduct of a bodhisattva, you could say. So it's very traditionally baked in that you have all these teachings in there, and you could say that life is the truth of cessation of suffering and the cause of suffering, right? It's all the 4 noble truths. You could say that impermanence is talking about all the ways that we struggle with suffering and also free ourselves from it. That taking refuge is about how we work with our motivation. That being kind to ourselves is how we navigate the path without self-aggression and using the practices to hurt ourselves. That we actually are developing the altruistic intent, the ability to understand the true nature, and then we're sharing that with others. So that's a complete path. And the next 7 gestures, which, when we finish this cohort, we'll start up again next May with the second cycle of teachings, which moves from the 8th through to the 14th gestures, which have to do with the notion of tantra or tantrayana, the idea of blessings and offering and purification and working with purifying the sense perceptions and working with relational magic and energy and working with the sense of the self as a deity or and the energy of bliss in the body. So all these themes that are more associated with that level of teaching in Buddhism. And that, I suppose, also could function on its own as a path of, but fortunately we have all these teachings that work together. So it's not like you have to choose, but they all kind of illuminate each other, like the different facets of the jewel across each other through the crystal. It's not like one or the other. Yeah. So as we've lived our lives, we've gone through things, we've experienced ups and downs, and we have life experience among us in our Sangha, and that's such a bonus for entering into the path maturely and not mistaking the path for another way to avoid ourselves, but actually it's an opportunity to really get to know ourselves, right? To really get to help ourselves and others to fulfill our potential. So the seventh gesture, which we will transmit the first sub-practice this evening and then have a little discussion, is about expressing compassion. Funny thing is about these first 1 through 7, I say they're about like Hinayana Maya, but it's not really true, because they're just like in the Shambhala teachings, it's all coming from this kind of Dzogchen and Mahamudra perspective. So it's very misleading to say that it's very mixed with the tantric approach, and it's kind of impossible to separate them. It's the aesthetic or flavor of it that it's all mixed together. I have to say that because the techniques are ridiculously drawn from all of that. I mean, it's through that lens that we are exploring the teachings that teach us the basic sense of presence and ability to work with our mind, and then the teachings on compassion and emptiness. They're coming from this flavor of the kind of practice we do together. So I just wanted to say that. I was like, wait a second, I made that sound too tidy. It's not that simple. But anyway, so what we're doing, it is a practice of the seventh gesture is a practice of further articulating our compassion into service to others in our life. One way we could distinguish this from the fifth gesture, which was really about empathy, right? The idea that we have these unique abilities in our natural goodness as human beings. We have a system with other mammals of mirror neurons, this ability to synchronize our facial muscles and breath and heartbeats and kind of get into this kind of beautiful space of acceptance and validation that happens with social connection in the form of safety in the human nervous system and other mammals. It's a beautiful thing. And then there's also the quality of empathy that is just the emotional resonance, the ability to develop that skill. I hear different perspectives on this. Some people feel that there can be training that helps people develop that. And some people, depending on their neurodiversity or conditioning, they might have more or less ability with that. It's an interesting thing. I think the jury's still out. There's lots of different studies that I don't really know what people think of that. My personal thought is that if every school system did social emotional learning from a young age, that we'd probably have a much safer and healthier society. I think that's fair to say. I don't think I'm wrong about if we had more parents trained in loving conduct, regardless of the diversity of their children, that would probably be good, right? So I'm not claiming that everyone will respond to these teachings the same way, but I do think generally it's still something that is part of the human condition to learn, whatever our starting point, to learn how to kind of feel energy in the body. There are people who can't feel where their legs are in space, or they have poor proprioception, but it can be developed. And I think all of the studies show that neuroplasticity is possible, whatever your starting point and however far one can go. There are many trainable skills. I know one study even showing that people with sociopathic tendencies could develop compassion with compassion training. Like that even if it wasn't easy for them to take on someone else's perspective, they could get to a point where they're like, I know how to do this better now. So I thought that was really promising and neat. But like anything, these are skills we learn and train in and they get better at. So that emotional ability to resonate, that's one type of skill. And then another skill, the taking another's perspective, using the capacity of our cognitive ability. Sometimes it's called mentalizing in the Western world. In the Buddhist world, it's kind of thought of as how prajna, how our intelligence can kind of be an agent for compassion. The fifth gesture traditionally, or the fifth gesture corresponds to the teachings in the Mahayana, which traditionally talk about aspiring compassion. And aspiring compassion is whenever we aspire to be helpful, whenever we wish that that generating a wish or a heart that longs to help beings, even that is said to not only show up in our conduct with others later, but also help us work through emotional obstacles in ourselves. And they sometimes say it's like melting the ice around our heart. So aspiring compassion is not just like, oh, what a privilege that some people can sit around and aspire to be helpful. It's like, that's the mockery that people might make of meditations, like aspiring meditations. And what I would say is, where are your manners? Don't you know about nurturing? We should all nurture each other. That's very rude. So yeah, nurturing is good. We don't pick on people who are developing beautiful skills. And by the way, I don't think any of us could ever be done because these are called the immeasurable qualities. They're said to be unlimitedly developed. Our loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity are called the four immeasurables because they're literally thought there's no limit to how far they can be cultivated. So the aspiring isn't just like, oh, I wish. It's also I wish, and now I'm actually generating the mind. That's what they call it, generating the chitta, the bodhicitta, the wish that can actually live in that energy. So it's practice. We're practicing expanding our heart. The sixth gesture, of course, working with the nature of compassion, the nature of reality, space, emptiness kind of thing, very powerful. And then we move into, that's the ultimate bodhicitta, with the relative being the fifth gesture. And then bringing the two together and entering compassion is the second stage of the Mahayana that's talked about. And this is the paramitas, when we begin to try to apply generosity, discipline, patience, exertion, meditation, and wisdom in the daily life for the benefit of beings, meaning our practice enters into our conduct, which is the living sadhana, right? So we're trying to bring compassion into daily life. So this is when our behavior reflects our training. We train in generating the empathy and the skills. I would argue even those, by the way, obviously, just as you know, in my presentation, the fifth gesture is actually kind of entering anyway, because if you bring those skills to social interaction, it's entering compassion, right? But I just combine our natural social instincts with aspiring so that we're right away testing out and trying and entering. That's pretty technical, but it's the living sadhana. Come on, of course we're bringing into our life, right? That's the style. But it's covering both bases. It means that we're not expected to be perfect at it, and we can train on our own, and we can try to bring it in and test it out on the spot. Because I believe as Westerners or modern people, we need to test things out all the time and feel them and get feedback, and that's how we grow. We don't grow by just training in absence of feedback and then testing it out. So that's just not how we're wired, or that's not how our society's set up. So, but specifically, these practices start to bring the seventh gesture practices start to focus more on how do we take the suffering of others onto ourselves and give others our compassion. And this is so timed completely accidentally but perfectly with the 37 practices, where we're working on that, right, on Sundays with and each weekly video is right now on this topic. So that's an auspicious convergence, but and we will explore the practice of Tonglen, sending and taking. The practice is sort of expressed in the 37 practices. When talking about taking on the suffering of others, it's implying that practice, and we will learn that instruction. But there's a lot of sort of specific and particular preparation we do in the in the four sub practices for the seventh gesture in order to take that on. So it's not where we start immediately. So we're going to begin with this next practice. I'll transmit that. I think what I want to share is that the seventh gesture is perhaps the first explicit time in this cycle of teachings that we say, now we're going to lightly, but nonetheless, stack or layer the preceding six gestures in order to do this practice. And this could sound daunting, maybe a little, oh, we have to do all of them at once. I don't mean to create an unnecessary obstacle by saying it that way, but another way of putting it is, no, it's just, it's not like that. We just are going to flash on each one and have the confidence that they are sort of present in us. And I think that's a light way of doing it that's actually very efficient, because one thing is for sure, we don't make up our ability to remember things and kind of hold things. It's in us naturally. And when we think we have to micromanage that, it could bring up anxiety. Don't worry. I'm not going to ask you to micromanage anything and try to juggle six things and add a seventh and then four of the, no, don't worry. But I'm just saying that there will be a light sense. And a light sense means just a refresher before we begin. And flashing on any time during the practice, flashing on the preceding ones as needed is fine, but especially the just preceding gesture of the sixth gesture. And you'll see in the instructions it's built in. So let's just do that. We'll do the six preceding gestures very briefly and just kind of get them in our short-term memory, the feeling of them, and then rest in this new one. So we start with first gesture. Life. And then impermanence out of alive. Connecting with our motivation. Moving into self-compassion. moving into empathy and the altruistic heart. From that heart into the spaciousness. So we have this light sense that in the spaciousness there's this natural aliveness, this impermanence, this sense of commitment, sense of care and love. It's just in there. It's in the space of our being. We don't have to remember it. It's not a mental gymnastic, but it is just a nice little reminder. You can flash on that. And then within this height, width, and depth, we're feeling the spaciousness, feeling the space around us and inside of us. We're still continuing that. And then we have a sense of a lightness that it's if the bones of our bone of our skull starts to turn into kind of a light, airy quality, almost like space, but almost like it has a crystal quality, but see-through. Like you could put your hand through it. And that there's a quality of still feeling the height, width, and depth. That maybe you could place in the head center towards the back of the head in front of the spine, just like a little tiny moon that's shining like a full moon. Sense of gentle moonlight, as if the skull is of crystal, air, or light, and it's being shined on by moonlight in this head center. And you can play with it. You can make the moon a little smaller and a little smaller until it's like the size of a sesame seed, very small. And make it a little bigger, like a dime size. And then don't forget the height, width, and depth, the feeling of this. You can feel the sense of winter or the crystalline quality of snow and ice, sense of moonlight on the snow, peacefulness. And you can feel that your head is almost like your skull has disappeared its solidity. And you feel the height, width, and depth, but there's this kind of crystal progenious skull that's made of light. Or space. It's very light. And we're resting here in this visualization with the height, width, and depth, but we're bringing this emphasis to the skull. Excuse me. and its cascading moonlight of compassion. This is the pacifying energy, but it's also crystalline, and it has in it a feeling of the seed of wrathful compassion, which is compassion that comes from the precision. It's anger without hatred. It's anger that's in service of love. But here, it's not even, we're so gentle here. It's not even anger per se. It's just the sharpness of crystal and light. And yet it's all very airy. It's not dense. It's not hard. And we're resting in this, we call it this intelligence, this bright, brilliant softness of the intellect being, you could say, transformed from conceptual intelligence to perceptual intelligence, this kind of insightful, curious, light, soft, very precise. And I want you to imagine this experience as a form of compassion. You're radiating this moonlight from this, and this crystal light from your height, width, and depth, and it's as if it's like a lighthouse or a compassionate radiance that has, it's as, imagine the rays of this light, everything it touches becomes brilliantly self-aware, or anything that encounters this light is brought into contact with natural intelligence, deep intelligence. It's very important to stay in contact with the whole height, width, and depth, to not just float up into the head, as we so often do in our culture. Here, we're just transforming the thickness and hardness of the skull, and the kind of, you know that phrase, hard-headed? It's so perfect, right? We're the hard-headedness of someone who thinks they're right. You know, that's the opposite of this. So here we're actually visualizing, right, sensualizing our skull as the opposite of hard-headed. It's light, not light-headed in that you're gonna pass out, but crystal and transparent. But you're feeling the bottom of your body, the breadth, the front and the back as well, and we're just feeling this moonlight quality, crystalline quality, in service of compassion, special kind of compassion. If you've ever licked an icicle or eaten snow, crunch, you know, or the way winter air is so crisp, so much clarity. And you know them, if you have has everyone seen the moonlight on the snow? Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, right? And so this is, if you're looking for a color or an environment, you can visualize that you're in that moonlight in the snow kind of compassion. And the air is cold, but it's like you're kind of one with that. You're not freezing. Don't worry, you're not getting cold. But you're just feeling the kind of precision and gentleness of that. You can imagine your whole body, height, width, and depth, is filled with that kind of rich, gentle moonlight, snow light. All compassionate action comes from knowing what to do. All knowing what to do comes from clarity. All interventions of compassionate action come from clearly seeing there's a cooling quality too to this kind of compassionate kind of, sometimes we need warming and sometimes we need cooling. Need to cool down. Sometimes you need to warm that up. So that's the last thing I'll say before we discuss is one can now bring this crystal prajna skull, this moonlight on the snow kind of visualization to dynamics in one's life. Holding a curiosity of what is needed. What does this part of compassion have to say? Cooler heads will prevail. Isn't it crazy that these phrases exist in our, and we think, oh, it's just a coincidence. No, everything's automatopoeic, right? Everyone knows, right? What I'm trying to do here is reclaim this beautiful part of our body. It's been so misused in our culture, and it has so much goodness. It's not bad. There's no bad part of our body, not a single part. All of it's beautiful. But this is also needs to be understood. And in the traditional teachings, the wrathful deities live in what's called the bone mansion, the head, in the brain. And the peaceful deities live in the heart. They are working together, but they're different. And so this is very interesting to think of wrathful and peaceful. Now, wrath also, we think of it, oh shit, somebody's losing their temper, somebody's getting angry. That's not what we mean here. We mean being able to use purified, that energy purified is so compassionate. And it's needed in order to act sometimes. We need to have that clarity and fearlessness and that energy that's like, no. And it's not aggressive. Now, of course, this energy can go wildly aggressive easily. But a lot of people, when they, in the tantrika teachings, when they would teach wrathful compassion, they would teach people these deities that were, flaming, intense, scary, they look like monsters or something. And it's like, oh boy. And you're supposed to like get into your anger and really see the nature of it. It's like, okay, that's great. But here, it's a lot gentler entryway. It's not about going to 10. It's working with the lower gears of that energy and seeing, right, can I work with it without being heightened? And can I just work with the gentle quality of the clarity of intellect? It's said in the teachings that intellect actually pacifies situations when we use it appropriately. And when we have clear seeing, it actually brings about a kind of clarity. It's the same thing as like giving a boundary to a child. It's pacifying rather than stultifying, as long as it's a balanced thing, right? So in the same way, compassion that comes from this kind of crystal prajna skull, this moonlight, this crystalline quality, can soothe or cool situations so that we're not hot-headed. Aren't these phrases crazy? Hot-headed, hard-headed, right? What a hothead. Isn't that a phrase? Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's so funny that we all know, God, that hard-headed, hot-headed, cooler heads will prevail. What are some others? I mean, it's funny, isn't it? So that's the starting point. And I just wanted to check in with everyone, like, what was it like to do that? What came up? What are the obstacles, challenges, invitations, concerns, delights, all of it? Everything on the table, because we're just learning, and it's okay to explore it, and we'll probably develop. We'll do a little short practice session again before we close, just, so we have more time to get familiar. But on the first thought, best thought here, what came up as you practiced this?
I just love this, Nick. Yeah, this is very relatable. Not that it's in practiced, although under situations, for example, being a mother, when I'm not too tired, too hungry, too triggered.
Right.
So I do have experiences of it, and just had some experiences of it this afternoon. With clients that I was working with, etc. Yeah, so it's really beautiful. It's almost to me like this silvery, shimmering energy, just really radiant, and yet, how do I practice that? So times can, but I love it. This is just relatable to me, and yet I can see the ways that I've closed that down or had it closed down, or that when I was younger, the parts of me that didn't want to embody it for various reasons. But anyways, and I can think what some of those are, but.
Oh, Lynn, I'm so glad. And and yes, I feel like, the number that our society has done on women, and this energy being like, don't be, not going to say it, the B word, right? And that kind of mean, like, don't be sharp, don't be clear, don't be precise, almost like, and the infantilizing or all that. And then for men, no training, you can be aggressive and intellectual, but no training on impact or the gentle aspect or the crystalline or the precision of it. Just go ahead and say what you need to say, get things done, and those horrible, like either suppression, or no, or total outburst, and I mean, those are terrible generalizations, I know, but just in terms of like genderized robbery, really, of this wisdom in our bodies, and that's just one of many possible ways. But sorry, yeah. So reclamation of that there's nothing to be ashamed of in having this brilliance and clarity, and even our educational system is like, don't shine too bright, and or I don't want other people to take don't notice me too much, or other people won't like you because you're being, and even just giving feedback and receiving feedback in our culture, like except for special environments where people have some training, that's like a really sketchy thing to do, to contact this clarity, because it's almost like, careful, if you tell the truth, no one will like you. Wow, what do you mean? Why are we making it all about the receiver? I mean, the person sharing. Why doesn't the receiver learn skills to, like, empower themselves to receive something and say, hey, well, this is what I heard and this is what but we just don't train it. We don't train that part, and we train all the content, right, of the head, all the intellectual thinking and that sharpness, and in those worlds, but we totally lose the perspective when we get. I mean, I've watched brilliant professors get in these pathetic, like schoolboy girl arguments about things where they're completely like lacking the precision in the moonlight, and it's just thought battles, right? Because they're getting really, and it's like allowed, right? They're very smart and they're having a debate, and there's and you can see their body language. They're really irritated. They probably come out of those debates like, that was my one. So like, even really erudite, educated, people are training people are not even skilled in this. And I think it makes people more brilliant, everyone, in different ways, in their own magical way, but we're going straight to the source. Oh God, I'm sorry, you got me all excited, but the last thing I'll say is, I think it's very simply applicable once we get comfortable with the sensualization of it, and however we connect with it, and we trust that that's enough. Like, it doesn't have to look the way I'm saying. It's just, I'm giving you tips and ideas, but you can do it however it feels right for you. But once you get comfortable doing it, you can do it right in a situation, right on the spot with other people. You can just come into your high width and depth, shine that feeling of crystalline moonlight, and then suddenly, I'm amazed. I mean, the $24,000 question is, how do you remember to do that in the middle of a conversation or dynamic? Well, that's always our practice, right? That's why you need the watch. Just kidding. But yeah.
But the moon and the moonlight is, and the moon is very helpful to me. I really relate to that. It's very special to me.
Oh, I'm so glad, Lynn. I'm so glad. Yeah. It's so gentle, isn't when the way it casts its light down on things, and it's like, oh, it's so elegant, it's so subtle. It's like, it's bright enough to see things, but not so bright that it's like the day, which sun is so like intense, but it's so gentle. It's so like, it's like just cascading softness. It's weird, right? It's almost paradoxical. I'm saying this is connected with, potentially, with wrathful compassion, or the cutting quality, the clarity, the crystallineness. But see, there's no aggression in it. It's gentle. It's gentle. So this is why the language almost falls apart when we try to talk about it. And no wonder people get so confused with wrathful compassion, because it sounds like an oxymoron in our culture. It's almost like precise gentleness, or precise love, or crystalline love. You know, like, and I think of flavors, think of textures, think of sounds, think of all the senses. Really allow yourself to get into the whatever sense of it, the coolness, cold, yeah, all of them. Like, you know, the snow, whatever helps you. You have a lot of freedom to trust yourself. That's all I'm trying.
I loved what Lynn was saying, and what you were kind of riffing on too, Nick, about at the end with the moonlight, because that's kind of what came up for me too, was this like that it's like a gentle clarity. And I just for an instant I flashed on an episode of Star Wars or Star Trek Next Generation,
Yeah.
where I don't know if anyone is familiar with the droid Data.
Yes.
And he's I think he's telling the counselor Deanna Troi basically that he's got a crush on her, but but he's a droid, right? So he can't have emotions that crushes would be made of. So he says something along the lines of my neural pathways have grown accustomed to your sensory input, or something like that. And it's just this I'd never really thought of it this way until now. It's this really sort of like this Vajra clarity with heart, or that wants to have, it's Vajra clarity that wants to have heart.
I only had a heart. Yes. Oh my gosh. I am more Deanna Troi than Data. I probably always will be. But that said, I like developing this because if one is more easy, the heart, which I'll do next. Don't tell anyone. But the head,
I had a total girl crush on Deanna Troi.
Okay, she was really cool. But I gotta say that doesn't everyone have at least one really nerdy friend who's so intellectually brilliant and they're so kind? Do you know the kind of person I'm talking to? Like, they're not necessarily like emotionally like super, comfortable, and they don't, but they're just like, they're precision. You have someone in mind, don't you? Yeah, everyone does. I love these people so much. They like make me so happy. They're people that I adore because I'm like, wow, I will never be like you. But I love what you can do. Do you know what I mean? It's like being in a band. Like, I'm so glad you're the drummer because I'm the guitar player or whatever. You know what I mean? And I actually like, I'm thinking of a few people I've known that are like that. And it's such a sweet, and Data's is a great example. So he's so sweet in that show. If everyone knows the show, I don't know, but yeah, he's such a sweetie, right? He's like, and what it turns out to be is as the show goes on, it's the classic thing. You think he's the robot, but he turns out to be one of the most compassionate and like thoughtful people on the show. And I think it's that beautiful. It's showing that there's many ways to, many roads to Rome, as they say, right? There's many different ways to be, and they're all beautiful. And we don't have to be good at all of them. We're going to be more accustomed to one or the other. But it's really fun to practice the magic of that. And I find when I connect with the crystalline and the snow and the moonlight quality and the crystal skull, I find I feel like more connected with that kind of wisdom than I might normally, right? It actually does grow. It's like, there's something to it. It's not just pretend or make believe. Well, maybe it is a little make believe and pretend, but then it starts to happen. That's the magic. It starts to actually unlock something. What else? What else came up? Flavors of compassion.
I thought it was a beautiful experience, and I could feel the cold and the snow and the glistening and expansiveness. And then at some point, I felt my heart was also generating that light. So it was like just.
Whoa. It feels good, right, Lori?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, it's so cool that it went to your heart, right? That's the thing that's so interesting about this. When doing the height, width, and depth as the background practice, it kind of reminds us that even though we're giving a little love to this 14-pound skull and making it like 0 grams for a little while, but even though we're doing that, we're also still feeling the whole space and the space around us. And then there's this room for that moonlight to expand and fill up our body. And then if our heart lights up as a moon too, beautiful, right? And so there's this kind of, this was part of the magic in the Tibetan tradition of practicing various deities or connecting with different energies. It was the idea of becoming a channel for different kinds of wisdom, different kinds of energy. And that's very much baked into these practices. We're opening up ourselves to the sort of blessings or access to what comes when we light up our lamp and hold out our cup or hands. You know what I mean? There's something can come. And that's what I find so beautiful about this is I don't necessarily start thinking, wow, I'm going to come up with a solution to a situation, or I'm going to come up with some clarity to know what to do. It's more like I'm just going to rest in this feeling, and then maybe something will come up about a situation, or maybe not. Maybe I'll just rest in the glow of it. But even just doing that somehow opens up a channel of being more available to shifting that gear. You know, they say that, Carla McLaren, who I love, who did the podcast, the work on, no negative emotions. They're all messengers of our wisdom and our survival instincts, and they're all there to help us. Love that. But I think one of her studies said that if you learn more names for your emotions, you can feel more emotions, more gradations, right? So here we're not necessarily naming with a verbal name, but we're giving a chalice to this certain kind of energy in our embodied experience. We're giving space to experience this kind of, and it's even further than naming it. We're actually practicing dwelling in that kind of wisdom or compassionate stance. And as we durationally rest in that sensualization and the qualities of moonlight and snow and crystal and lightness of the head and the space and all that, it is my firm belief that we are priming our whole system to have more and more access to that kind of perspective. Again, when we remember to apply it on the spot. And sometimes, luckily, with the grace of the way our nervous system and mental memory works, it will just pop up at times the more we do it. It does occasionally work like that. But, you know, I don't rely on that, because that's when they're like, yeah, you know, many eons will master this. It's like, how about we take a more active role? So occasionally try to remember, you know, but that's my playful, loving admonishment. But yeah, so on the spot practice is good, but first we do it formally like this to just get familiar. And then we'll try to, like, every once in a while, try it on the spot with a person in a dynamic, or bring an issue up and bring this moonlight to it. See what happens. It's it's a little bit of a leap of faith. And it's like, okay, I'm going to bring something up and I'm going to add moonlight, just add water and see, does anything kind of, because I never know if an insight or a perspective or something's going to form. I don't know beforehand. That's part of the magic of it, you know, is you don't quite know. You there is a little faith involved of, like, let's see. Because if we know already, we're just using the ordinary intellect, which is fine. But here, this is a little different. This is the special moonlight prajna crystal intellect. It's a little more subtle and a little more connected to the universe. I don't know.
Well, again, it reminds me of a full moon versus quarter sliver. So it illuminates the shadows.
Yes. Yes. It illuminates the shadows. Ah, I love that. This is going to sound weird, but I have to say it because it came up into my mind during this. But it's kind of like when you're out in the snow with the moonlight, and it's almost like the moonlight is so gentle that it'll still let little animals hide in shadows a little, but not completely, because the diffuse light is enough. And so there's this kind of gentle encounter where you could, yes, do you see what I mean? You don't spook the thing in the shadow. Okay, thank you for you brought that out, Lynn, I think, in just what you said. And I think it's a non-startling kind of light. So that those shadow parts of us don't have to, like, freak out and run and hide. They can kind of, yeah, exactly. They can kind of go, well, maybe we can see each other. It's kind of like when, like when you're kids and you're like, talk about something more vulnerable in the dark, because they can't quite see you, or so, you know what I mean? It's like there's something nurturing about that. This is very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Cool, soft, gentle, crystalline, sparkling. What are some other good adjectives?
Lori mentioned glimmering, wasn't it? Was that what it was, Lori?
Glimmering. Love that. Thank you.
I think it was glistening.
Oh, glistening. Both. Glistening, yes. Okay. Glistening. Isn't that the perfect word? Because it has the sparkle, the sharpness of the crystal, but also the lightness of the moonlight. Glisten. Yeah.
You know, glisten has listen in it too. So there's a
Oh,
receptive quality. Woo! Woohoo!
yeah. Right, because something that glistens receives the light and transmits it, but it receives it. Yes. Okay. Isn't this fun? This is why Ruthie, my teacher said to me when I was confessing, my playing games with my friend, and she said, "Oh, isn't that wonderful? You still have your imagination." And I was like so shocked. And she's like, "I'm so sad that most adults don't have access to their imagination." And I thought that was such a powerful transmission of what we're doing. And it doesn't have to be visual. It can be sensual. It can be any of the senses, whatever helps you. You do it your way. Trust yourself. You're unique. You're a snowflake of your own kind, right? So one thing I've worried about was visualization practice, as they call it, which I really don't prefer to say. I like to say imaginational or sensualization, because it's any of the senses or any kind of feeling that you can have, right? You just trust yourself. What works for you is what is right. And I think that's so unfortunately underrepresented in our collective educational history. Is that that's not, usually the pedagogy is, no, you have to do it the right way and it's this way. And I'm really saying not really. It's more like trusting yourself. And that is a skill that I really keep maybe harping on with all of you. And I think you know it, but it's still something we're learning how to do together, I think, too, is really see, no, really, like however, I remember Ani Pema said, she said, "I can't really visualize. They tell me to imagine, I can't, but I can feel the connection." And I was like, oh my God, when she said that, it was so helpful to me, because I was having trouble with some of these complex visualizations, but I could feel it. And ironically, once she said, I read her saying that, and then I started doing the feeling more. Well, then it's so weird. We're so finicky. Then I could visualize better with the feeling. It was so funny. Once I accepted that I do feeling, suddenly the visuals got a little better. I was like, that's unfair. So we can't fight ourselves. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't have to look anyway. Yeah.
You know, it's weird. I don't have a sense of smell, but I do in my imagination. No idea if it's accurate or whatever, but I could smell the snow and the, blowing in the, it's kind of weird.
That's amazing, Lori. That is the subtle body. That's your spirit generating the smell from that's a part of our wisdom. Isn't that amazing? And that's why in dreams we can recreate the whole perceptual world mind-blowingly and feel, and some dreams are less vivid and some are so vivid they're realer than anything. They seem so right. So it's like, that is the power of our subtle body and awareness, is that our subtle body can do all of it. Oh, that's so great. I'm so happy for you. That's so cool. And I would say, by the way, this is fascinating, just in terms of accuracy. You know, this is getting a little out there, but still, I love this topic, so I'll share it. But synesthesia, which is loosely defined as experiencing one sense through another, that's one way they talk about it. But I think of it in our process as more about the power, the creative power of the subtle body to imagine and feel different senses in different ways. And it's been said by people that study it that there's one guy, this is a great story, it's just fascinating. There's a chef who is synesthesic. He has visual imagery for tastes, and he makes all of his food based on what he sees, and he can repeat it. He runs a really good restaurant, and he repeatedly can make food based on how things look in his mind. So that's how he and it just shows that, you know, bats hear with sounds, dolphins hear with sonar, you know, so I don't think there is just one way that's accurate. So I think it's really fascinating, but that's getting out there. But anyway, just wanted to throw that in because I love that. There are many ways to perceive reality, and they're all valid. They can all be valid, which is wild.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else does this, but a lot of times I think maybe emotions and experiences seem to have a color.
Yes.
So it's kind of like that.
That is it. That is, and actually, you know what I believe? That synesthesia is actually aspects of wisdom coming through the display of our subtle body. So that's really cool. Yeah, it's I love that stuff. I think, yeah, I think it's amazing. And
my son, when he was young, he would see auras around
Yes.
people. So I think that's another way, like you see somebody's energy field.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That, and you know, that is exactly right. And, you know, what we've done in, you know, a fearful materialistic culture is we denigrate any non-consensus experience. And thankfully that is being challenged these days, you know, in many ways, but that is such a damaging, I mean, we made left-handed people write with their right hands. The gross aggression that we practiced on people is so well documented. But the idea that, you know, people perceive in wildly more complex ways. And one of the ways I look at it is that the subtle body, which is the energetic spirit, right, can perceive in all the senses and create and see and see, hear and do all these things, and it can see sounds, hear tastes, smell, touches, and that's actually, according to what I'm hearing from the latest research on perception, people are saying, yeah, we should probably think of synesthesia more as the diversity of perception. That, you know, when you look at animals, I think I shared this with you, Jen. I don't know if I shared it with all of you, but I know I think I did actually. Pardon me for repeating, but I love it so much. Is dolphins can with their echo sonar, they can see a reef with the echo, you know, location of their sonar, and then they can. This is the crazy part. They can make the sound of the echolocation to the other dolphin, so the other dolphin sees the reef that they're seeing. Oh my gosh. And apparently they can even emphasize certain things and change it a little, see the shark in the background and send it to, so they don't even do conceptual representation. They do actual energetic synesthetic transmission through sound so the other one can, no wonder we think they're so brilliant, because they are. They can actually communicate non-conceptually through the, and a bat can echolocate. Who can say they're not? And you know, bees, oh my gosh, I think I said this, but I'll just say, bees can perceive in the ultraviolet. Do you know that they can see intricate patterns on flowers that we can't see with our eyes? That's crazy to me. So it begs the question, reality is so unlimited, perception is so wide and flexible. There are so many ways that things can, and they're all true. This comes back to the 0 and 1 and the many facets. Think of the multifaceted jewel. Each facet is another way to perceive. They're all true. They're all part of the jewel, and they're all different. What a wonderful way to open the heart and mind and go, wow, what we see is not reality. It's one, what we're seeing right now is synesthesia. It's not the real thing. It's just one way of seeing. And then it opens up this magical, very psychedelic truth that every perception is valid. Every way of seeing is equally powerful, and they're different, and there's so many. And the more you think of, the more it kind of goes, whoa, that is so cool. So this is why I love our imagination, because I believe our imagination is actually more in touch with true reality than any one of the senses, to get even trippier, right? Because it's flexible and it can overlay, combine, and respond to the senses and interact with them. For example, I have synesthesia with sound. When I listen to music, I see colors and shapes and textures. I've always seen it since I was young, and I can't help it. Like, I just see it. I can kind of tune into it or out of it. Like, I don't have to pay attention to it. But if I do, it's beautiful, and it's actually very much connected with the music I listen to. I like certain, and you know, I can also feel it and listen to lyrics, but there's so many levels to reality, and it's just so beautiful to open the heart to that. And that's part of what we're doing with this imaginal practice, right? Imaginational practice is about opening the sense perceptions of the subtle body, or the beyond just the physical ones. And that's a real thing we're doing. We're gaining that skill. It's sneaky, but it's in there.
I remember being able to do that, Nick, when I had been smoking marijuana.
Yes, sure.
I mean, it's really true. Well, I know what you're saying, because I've experienced that under certain influences.
That, you know what's so amazing about substances? I mean, in indigenous community, they're called medicine. And you go on a journey with the medicine, and the medicine shows you truths about reality, and it's meant to be heart opening and mind opening and expanding. And I used to think as a kid, oh, you know, people take drugs. And what I heard from all the people talking bad, because I grew up during the war on drugs. And so all the propaganda I heard, it's really funny. They sent this poor straight-laced cop into our like 5th grade class to tell us about not having drugs. And it was like a comedy routine. This poor guy couldn't have glorified drugs more if he had tried. I mean, I wish I was recording it, because he was trying to make it seem like such a bad idea. And all these 5th graders were like, whoa. Like, I think he didn't understand. Like, his stories were not working. For example, one story, he said, he goes, you really don't want to take acid, and I'll tell you why. And because it's, you know, like Pink Floyd, people who take acid listen to music like that. I swear he said that, and everyone was like, Pink Floyd, you know, like writing it. I'm just like, what is he thinking? And then he goes, this was 1984, 85. It's like and then he goes, you know, one person I had to arrest told me that they were on the moon. seeing the moon, and every kid's like, whoa, and he was like, it's not good. Just like, and I was like, this poor cop, he's in over his head. He was just trying to like make it seem scary, and every kid was like, this amazing. And it was so funny. But I remember that. So I was like, this guy's bombing. I was like, I felt bad for him as a fifth grader. I was like, he doesn't understand children. But anyway, the funny thing is that our imaginations, what I was trying to be told was that our imaginations are unreal, and the drugs show us fake things that aren't real. What I've come to realize is that used properly, those things actually show us real things about ourselves and our nature. They're not showing us fake things. They're just showing it. We're only accessing it through that experience. And so what I love about meditation is we can actually, without relying on something external alone, we can also begin to gain mastery and or competency in our own natural birthright. Some of these qualities. And it was funny for me, I never took drugs as a teenager, not because the cop, I mean, he probably sent me in the other drugs, but because my brother was he had all the druggies were his buddies, and the LSD dealer of the town was his best friend. And so like all the drug kids would come over our house and be on drugs. And I guess my parents were like watching them carefully out of safe space. But so I saw them, I was like, I don't want to be like that. I want to discover my own imagination on my own. I don't want to have any drugs. So I was like the straight, non-drug taker. But it's funny, by the time I actually ended up taking, some things later in life, I was a meditator for a long time. And then I took the little, took mushrooms. I was like, oh, I know this. This is what happens when you meditate a lot. It wasn't any different to me. So I came at it from such a different perspective, which I thought was really fortunate for me, because it was like, these things actually can be used really skillfully. And fortunately, nowadays, we're finally come full circle on all the psychotropic stuff and hallucinogenic stuff. Like Johns Hopkins did tons of research over a long time, and now they've come out, and now it's coming back as like a thing that can be used in certain therapies and things. And I think it's coming around where I think you all know but it's neat to see it finally not being demonized and things like that. But when I think of these centralization practices and imagination practices, I think a lot of the same propaganda that was like afraid of drugs and mind-altering experiences is also afraid of the imagination in our culture, and has denigrated it and characterized it as, even the idea of imaginary being unreal. But the last thing I'll say on my incredibly long rant about this, sorry, I got carried away, is that Asanga, one of my heroes in the Buddhist teaching, said, your unreal imagination exists. And that was the opening of a great text that he wrote. And so, in other words, the appearances of our mind are phenomena. Therefore, they must be respected as part of the universe. It's a very profound thing.
Nick, I forgot to tell you that I had another dream about you, and it was a very like a lucid type feeling. And we were in a group of people, and you were teaching, and I remember I had gone up to you, and you started kind of melting, like parts of something came out of your eye and it fell, and it was like you're melting or something, and I caught it in my hand, and I looked at you, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, you're leaving us, or you're disintegrating right in front of me. And it was such an emotional, like I was so struck and I was so stricken with sadness.
Mm.
It was really neat.
Mm.
Yeah, you were just like, things were just falling out of you. Looking at it.
Whoops, there goes an eye. Wow.
But it seemed
That's
so
beautiful.
real at the time, you know?
Yeah.
When I woke up and I was still had that feeling like, oh my Lord, you know, you're leaving us.
Yeah.
You know, that
Oh,
sense of
that's,
loss.
yeah. Oh, that's beautiful, Stephen. That's so interesting. Yeah. And
But,
that, yeah, Lori, go.
but he was leaving behind wisdom for you, and you caught it gently.
Mm.
I love that, Lori. That's interesting. That's a very powerful interpretation of that. Wow. You know, the sadness of the losing a teacher figure too is like having gone through that, already in my life and twice. Uh, that's also like there's also something just symbolically very powerful about that, because there's in all the stories of the teachers, they call it posthumous instructions, but really it's when the teacher was dying or after they died, they would appear in a vision to the student, and it was always like, okay, here's the final thing for you, and I think you see this a lot, like even with like in Star Wars, totally. Of course, they copied this because they loved archetypical things, but the reappearing of the teachers in the light body or something. But that idea of that's really powerful. The visionary experience and those archetypes, right? We all go through that we all know that those kinds of cycles are part of life and part of this realm. That's beautiful. And I love what you brought forth, Lori. That's great. That's so cool.
We have another one. Stephen.
You were leaving your plasticity,
Oh.
or how to say it. You were leaving like you were melting, and so your plasticity.
Yeah.
He was giving you his eye, like everything he's seen. But maybe you had this dream because he had the rainbow on his face. So you were thinking of him as a rainbow body, which is somebody who's passed on, right?
Ah.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love it. Symbolism, and that's a beautiful example, Lori, of what the Northern author called magical surrealism when talking about Pablo Neruda and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and they of course responded, no, we're just talking about reality. But I love their style of and you could see it also in Carlos Castaneda and all of that, like that's that Latin and South American kind of, and it's also in Asia, but this idea that like the rainbow on the face appearing and the dream and it's almost like it's all one magical symbolic dance. And so reality shifts from being our intellectual ideas about things to the actual experience that the montage of appearances, and that they all have significance. Nothing is without significance. This is actually funny, right? Talk about that kind of thing. The other night, my Maggie and I, my sweetie, were we were in the kitchen, and she goes out a lot in the woods. I mean, a lot. She's a real hiker. She's a woods woman. But and I had my Mato Tipola, my Devil's Power pin on, Devil's Power, and I leaned over because just to, I can't remember why, but just like maybe I was laughing, I don't know, and it fell to the ground. I don't know how the backing came off. It was on my collar and it just fell to the ground. As it fell to the ground, she looked down to pick it up. And as she looked down, she found a tick on her, right out of her calf. And it had made a red mark there. And she goes, "Oh shit." And we were both like, "What?" Like, because she's been working with, healing from Lyme's, but she does not want to get it again. She's and she was having a response. Oh, and so she caught it in time, and I got the tweezers and I took off the tick and, all the whole thing. And now she's going to get the medicine. But it easily, like, what are the odds, right? It was just the timing and the weirdness. And it's like, this is such a special pin for me, but also I still haven't found the backing. I don't know where, but I'm so glad it fell off because it helped her. Now, no, of course, you just laugh and you go, the coincidence, and this is the thing, again, in Western culture, we've misunderstood the word coincident and we've made it sound like it means randomness. It doesn't. It's a coincident. Two incidences co-happening, which is the definition of what? Auspicious coincidence, or tendril, or tashi tendril, as the Tibetans say, the auspicious coincidence, the thing that happened that somehow is there's wisdom coming through to us. And it's not just all having to come from us, right? We can be a part of it. We can be in it. So some of the sensualization practices or imaginary practices, they sound like, oh, I'm imagining moonlight and the crystalline quality. Okay, it's going to help me be compassionate and I'll connect with my intelligence and all right, fine. But what if when we do that, we're not alone? What if when we do that, there are energies, beings, awarenesses, whatever, that kind of perk up? So I just want to open that possibility that when you turn on your lighthouse, your lamp, your moon, you might be inviting wisdom that's not just having to come from here, but could come from here. And that's very deep in indigenous wisdom traditions and in Buddhism and especially Tibetan Buddhism. But I just want to point it out because it's kind of it's one of those, people love the mindfulness stuff, but when they get too far into the tradition, they're like, oh, there's no study that supports that yet, so let's not talk about that. But I'm like, you know what? I think there will be. I think there will be someday. But even whatever you say, I know those levels can be very powerful and very helpful. And so sometimes when we do these practices, it's helpful to have the openness to what kind of angel or drala or spirit or being or can help us. And I don't mean to you don't have to do that. I'm just saying it's available though, right? And it's an interesting thing that's in these practices, that kind of possibility of not being totally alone when you do it. Or that just because you do it alone doesn't mean somehow it isn't heard by something else. And it's the great part is we don't even have to know or not know. Something could come up. And I've had this experience. Something will come up in my mind or out of my heart or into my mind as a thought. I don't know where it came from. That it could have come from somewhere else. And I've had that experience later and I'll go, whoa, that's fascinating. Yeah. So we do open to magic when we open to magic. Yeah.
This is something that was coming up for me, and I just wasn't quite sure what to do with it the first time we did the practice, was like, where does curiosity fit into this 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 clarity, this knowing? And it, just as the transmission and conversation and discussion has evolved, there's like, we live in a culture that has taught us what to value and what's real and what's not real, and what's valuable, and like, there are ways of knowing that that are valued, and but I feel like there are so many more ways of knowing that
Mm.
like you were just saying, these things that happen that there's no logical explanation for, or that it's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell anybody about that.
Totally.
And so in some ways, I feel like that's part of that gentleness or something of the moonlight. That because it's the gentleness that allows for the curiosity.
Yes. Oh gosh, Janet, I'm so glad you shared that with us. That's so helpful.
Also, your favorite word, Janet, wonder.
I love it. It's like, if you were in the woods and then suddenly you see a cabin with light shining out of it, and I almost feel like at night or something, and I almost feel like when we turn our light on and do this practice, it's almost like we're that cabin lighting up the woods in a way, and there are beings or things that can kind of go, oh good, and be inspired and come and give us something or connect with us, or there's some way. It's almost like when you turn your lamp on, they can see you, and there's a magic to that, and you're protected by this incredible compassion, but you're drawing to you, like, I some ways I feel like, well, you want to draw Kuan Yin or Tara to you, shine this kind of light, and they'll be like, oh, they turned on. Oh, they're home. I'm going to go give them a blessing, or I'm going to go give them a cookie, or I baked a cake. They're home. I can give them something, so it's like, turn your light on. Now, of course, it also is us shining, and we're learning to do it in ourselves. But I love this ridiculously creative and joyful conversation has led us all the way into this dimension of it, which I'm so grateful for all of you for. And I love, Janet, what you just said about curiosity, because that's the state, and wonder, as you said, that's what allows us to enter. Without wonder, without curiosity, and we wonder why children can access this so easily, right? Because they don't have any of the conditioning that says no. They only have yes and wonder and curiosity, and then they're in it, and they magnetize that, and we feel it, and we know that that's sacred. And in wisdom cultures, that didn't get lost in teenage and adulthood, it was transferred on like a torch that's passed on and it doesn't go out. The flame stays alight. In our culture, it's so sad to watch that time where children are kind of taught that Santa Claus is not real and everything's better, and they kind of, lose this. But there is real magic in the world that they actually are connecting with. And then I think for us, those of us who hold that and can open with curiosity and wonder to it, and this is that crazy creation and perception is creation. Like it's that we look upon the eyes that look, the sights appear. It's such a trick, and no wonder why people who deny it, well, they are looking at a world where it doesn't exist, and they created that world, so no wonder they don't see it. It's the same bias that they can't see it because of their bias. They categorically refuse to see it, even if it's right in front of their face. And those who do look can't. So it's a very fascinating phenomenon, and I do, I pray that more and more, all the kinds of wisdom and intelligence will coalesce, that the scientific and the spiritual will be able to work together beautifully. And I have seen no reason not to, because they're part of the same reality. I think it's just the biases in one approach that it can't see, but people who take the approach and look for things find the most amazing things.
We're doing individual practice and yet in community. And
Yes.
when we're talking about turning the light on, it's interesting. A lot of our stories are about the lighthouse, the lonely lighthouse keeper and the boat, but actually it was often a family or a tradition or lineage of lighthouse keepers. And it was a whole community that was depending on the lighthouse keepers to keep their people safe, in fishing communities. I come from fishing community stock, and and when that wasn't available, whole boats of people perished. So being able to both be the light and believe the light can help us in those critical perfect storm times can make a difference for ourselves, but for communities as well.
That is so beautiful. And wow. That analogy, that metaphor, that imagery is just so powerful. Thank you so much. And I really feel like tonight all of us co-created this exploration so beautifully. Thank you, each of you, all of us. What a beautiful communal, we manifested the magic together of this teaching, and that is exactly what you were just sharing. It's like it is a family or a lineage that, and then just be open to receiving and transmitting it, that coming together. That's how this practice goes out into the world. Each of us goes into our interactions, and I was having a conversation with a student this morning in a one-on-one call where we were talking about, she was expressing some sadness about like, I can't do it alone. I want to bring sacredness to my family and to my, my community, but I just feel like I can't do it alone. And I was like, I hear you. Well, it's okay to ask for help. But like, there was a kind of fierce feeling in me. I was like, but you know what? I didn't say these words, but you're the lighthouse keeper. You're the one that cares about the light. You can do something. You may not go perfectly, but I'm here for you. But also you're you're sorry, you're here opening to that sacredness. You therefore, we're not, the good news is we don't have to create light. Light exists. It's what we're made of. We have to open to it and try to share it. And so then we started getting creative, and she's, we were thinking she could do things with her family and her community that don't have to be religiously intimidating, but could just be sacred in their intent and bring meaning to gatherings. And she was like, that's what I want to do. So we realized that sometimes it's more available than we think, but we need to kind of, it's a little daunting to step into being lighthouses in a way, but on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, but what I said to her is like, but look around, you're the one that's has your lamp on. Sorry, you gotta do it. You can do it as best we can. We can do it as best we can. Yeah.
Hey, Nick. Oh,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Okay. Mine is just, you were saying like it's magical, and
Yeah.
I agree, it's magical, but that can be a stigma in the community because magic is deceptive and man-made. So
Yeah.
could we say it's mystical?
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. That's great. And it reminds me of the Van Morrison song, Into the Mystic.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that song. So that kind of, yes.
So that doesn't block people who could be, benefiting from this. And they think at magic as witches, and what are those people doing?
I know. I love it. I love thinking of language that, this is such an art form of like, how do you share sacredness without the trappings of religious things that could turn people off? And the funny thing is, everyone loves meaning. Everyone loves sacredness. Not everyone loves religion. So how do you find the words?
Yeah.
It's a really great question, and I love that. Yeah, I love it, Lori. Thank you. We're coming to the end. Stephen, did you have something you wanted to
Yeah,
say?
I was just wondering about the significance of moonlight and how it relates to Tibetan. I think I've read about it before, but it'd be neat to hear what you have to say. Is it because it reflects the sunlight to us, or?
Oh yeah. So the moon is a big image and symbol in Tibet, and one of the ways they talk about it is, I know in the Sadhana Mahamudra at the very end, it says the moonlight of Mahamudra, pure and all pervading. So it's this idea, and what Mahamudra is the great symbol, the symbol which is a symbol of itself, for everything is a symbol of the true nature. And so one of the examples of the moon is they talk about the moonlight in a bucket or in a bowl or in a, and you look at the moon and there it is, but it's just this reflection. And there's something effervescent about that, the impermanence and the kind of mystical, we could say, appearances of reality, that everything is so, and again, it comes back to synesthesia, right? The moon in the reflection is in some ways just as real as the moon in the sky, and yet there's many ways to perceive, and that's a very mind-opening thing. But also the gentleness of moonlight, pure and all-pervading. That idea is in a lot of the literature in Buddhism, and I think it comes from basically just a very indigenous culture going, hey, we were in the moonlight. We saw the moon. The moon cycles are important. They keep a track of all the astrology and those cultures. And so right now we're past the waning moon a little bit and we're heading to the new moon, right? And each part of the cycle had a different significance, but the full moon was considered this compassionate thing because it brings the light of compassion of the sun into the darkness of the night. And that symbolism of, again, being a lighthouse. It's a natural moment of lighthouseness, and guidance in the dark, but it's so gentle. They always use the word gentle. And I think just if you look at it from an energetic point of view, when you feel the moon, I'd almost argue the moon beckoned them to talk about it in Buddhism. It's kind of like Van Gogh said, or Van Gogh, he said, once they asked him, like, where do you, he said something like, don't bother me. The sun is calling me. I have to go paint. The sun is out and I must heed its call, right? So that kind of passion and the other way around too. Like, I think the Buddhists were like, oh my God, the moonlight's so compassionate. We've got to talk about it. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll make that our dedication of merit. May all beings experience the pure, all-pervading moonlight of gentleness. May every being be freed with the cool moonlight from the torment of hot-headedness and hard-headedness. Have a great night. Thank you. What a great collaboration today.
Thank you.
Thank you.